Toronto wants more family-sized condos. I actually question that statement, but the reason why I want to discuss this article is that here's what's being built and why it doesn't work is what I wanted to actually discuss. Because the system in place to build these larger units is actually broken, and ultimately it falls on the fact that people have to pay a higher price to subsidize these larger units, meaning the people who are buying the entry-level stuff, likely first-time home buyers, is now also subsidizing the larger units because of these rules. So this is what I'm going to be discussing. Now, if you are looking for some help on how to navigate this real estate market as we're getting ready for the fall market, you could do so by booking a call with me using the link that's on the screen right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com. Simply click on a date and a time that works best for you. And then when you see the prompt, fill in your name, email, mobile phone number, and a question you have for me, and then we'll chat then. Good day, Toronto. Welcome to another episode of Prime Properties TV. My name is Zhen, and if you're enjoying the content I'm putting out there, do me a favor and like and subscribe. So the article we'll be covering today is Toronto wants more family-sized condos. Again, I question that. Here's why what's being built just doesn't work, right? And a lot of people probably already kind of have an idea, but I want to get down into the nitty-gritty of this and why this idea that's been floated around by politicians is actually detrimental to the entire market and your affordability. So the first thing I've highlighted here is housing experts say that we need more family-sized condos to help fix Toronto's housing crisis. But what we're building just doesn't work. Families don't want Frankensuites and aren't living in them. So we're going to call these 3-bedroom units Frankensuites, which honestly, they kind of are. They make no sense. I'm going to talk more about why they don't work later. But at the same time, you have to also understand that these Frankensuites are actually mandated by the city to be built. So this idea of, hey, let's build some larger units, not just to service the investors, but to service the end user, the family people who actually are going to buy these things so that they have homes. Cool, let's do that. But the problem is nobody wants to buy these things because they're way too expensive after condo fees on a monthly basis. These Frankensuites aren't designed very well because they don't make any sense. You're also lacking the backyard, which a lot of people are looking for. And here's the kicker. They cost just as much as if you were to buy a freehold home, right? So it just makes no sense. So this kind of rule just sits around doing nothing. And what happens is when, the pre-con market was moving, those were the only units that were ever left. Nobody ever buy those. Everyone buys the smallest units. And a lot of times that is sitting inventory for the builder and they just wait for a long time before someone buys it and they always slash it at a discount. That's ultimately what happens. So if you could actually just remove this out of the way and create units that people actually want to buy when the market is say normal, then maybe prices won't be as high because effectively the units that people are buying, they're priced higher price per foot, and these larger units are priced lower price per foot, which means that the smaller units are subsidizing the larger units, right? Now, here's kind of something that's interesting. There aren't a lot of families buying condos these days. Units have been progressively getting smaller in the past 15 to 20 years because the private sector is in the business of maximizing profits, which is totally true. Why would you go into business to not make money, right? That's a non-for-profit. They're not in the business of solving our problems, and policymakers need to be part of that solution. So whoever said this is focusing that the private sector should be solving the housing crisis we have. And unfortunately, it's left to the private sector. But the problem is the private sector is for profits. So either you force the private sector to be just for nonprofit and not make any money, which they're not going to do, or the government needs to incentivize the private sector to do so. And right now, I do think the government is doing some things to help incentivize the private sector to build by releasing some land. I know Tridel and Daniels has rebuilt a lot of areas like Regent Park where they take some of the subsidized homes, they blend it with new builds, and they get a discount so you can offer it at a lower price. So that stuff is great, right? But we need more of that as opposed to really what every developer is talking about. And even I keep talking about the development charges. It's a huge tax, right? And it's easy to see why these things are built for dorms because when you kind of just look at the floor plan, which, Toronto Star article has highlighted over here, you can see not many people want to live in this, right? So if you imagine this is 1,000 square feet, you already have one long corridor that wastes maybe 150 to 200 square feet, which is 10-15% of the square footage. And you kind of have to do that based on the footprint of the building. And obviously the primary bedroom generally is in good shape. They have windows here, but even though the entire unit is a corner, you can see that a lot of these bedrooms have these sliding glass doors, which a lot of people do not like. They really don't. Because if you think about it, even if you use it as a dorm, the only people who find that remotely acceptable would be students. And I see it all the time when I go into properties is there's like tin foil with tape that covers it up, or there's a curtain behind it that covers it up, right? So that no light comes into the bedroom. And this is even before you consider like soundproofing, like anything, because if you have any noise that travels, it's going to be heard by everybody, right? And then these walls are generally pretty thin as well. So a lot of people do not like this idea of living as a family, because what if you have like a crying baby, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's why these 3-bedroom units don't make sense, especially if they have a glass corridor. Now here's another one. Here's another problem with this layout is that, one, you have 2 sliding glass door now, which is even worse. And they have to do this because you need certain light coming into the bedrooms to call it a bedroom. Otherwise, you have something right here, what I call the den, which is like 9x7. You can effectively put like a queen size mattress and like one headstand and nowhere else to walk, right? This is why you have a couch that folds out here. But this one's even weird because it has an ensuite bathroom, right? So there's a lot of reasons why these like floor plans don't make a lot of sense, but the way they're designed have a really big impact on how they're sold and how they're used, right? Now, I know where these 2 floor plans come from. They come from the East End by Jarvis and Church, which has generally become like a student corridor for all the condos that have gone up, right? So to make it this many bedrooms, because look, this is not a corner unit. This is your only source of light on the upper side of this floor plan. You have to have these corner glass sliding doors to call them a bedroom. So if someone who owns this, they're obviously doing student rentals, and you can name this as like a 4-bedroom and 3 washroom. And look how small the kitchen is, right? In the living space. It's just small. But this is what they're designed to do. And this is why this article is saying, look, a lot of these 3-bedroom units aren't designed for families. Now, I'm going to get to the kind of the root of all of this, right? The system that we have set up is, unfortunately, investors buy these pre-construction, and it takes 5 to 7 years to build. If you're an end user, generally it doesn't make any sense. One, because you have to wait 5 to 7 years for this. So like you could have potentially 2 to 3 kids by the time your condo is ready. So it just makes no sense. The other thing is that life always changes, and I've had a lot of clients who are like, oh, I bought this thinking it was for myself. And by the time the condo is ready, they're like, oh, I got married, I have a kid, right? So they're like, well, I'm just going to turn it into a rental. So that also happens a lot too. So the problem with how our system is set up is that builders and developers have to pre-sell these units, and they have to pre-sell them to 70, 80%. So you want a certain amount of easy units to sell so that you can get the project off the ground. Otherwise, you're dead in the water. And kind of like what this article is saying is the easiest unit to sell is the cheapest one. And the general rule when you're buying pre-construction was that you want to buy the smallest unit of that asset class. You want to buy the smallest bachelor, the smallest 1-bedroom, the smallest 2-bedroom, because the rents are generally the same and you're not paying as high of a maintenance fee because the unit's smaller, and same with taxes. So your ROI is good. But when you put this on the end user to kind of like make it their home and live there long term, that doesn't work because size really makes a difference, right? I know there's a pun there somewhere. I'm just not going there. And developers are going to create these floor plans for the people who are going to buy them, which is ultimately investors, right? So it's a circular effect because end users don't buy them. They're too expensive, but then the city forces them to build it. So there's leftover stuff, right? Now they state that condo buildings should provide a minimum of 25% large units. 10% of those units should be 3-bedroom suites of at least 1,100 square feet. These are the units that get stuck around in inventory for pre-construction that do not get sold, and they don't intend for them to sell, but they need to sell the other 70 to 80% to get them off the ground, which tends to be the 1-bedrooms and the 2-bedrooms, right? And with 15% set aside for 2-bedroom units that total about at least 969 square feet. Now, those are a little bit easier because you can put them at the corner and they're rather functional, but it's just the 3-bedrooms that are kind of awkward. And as children go through their stages of development, they have distinct needs, including safety and the desire of varying levels of independence. Look, I grew up in an apartment until I was 6, then I moved to a basement. Like, these things are fine, they're really pretty. Unfortunately, it's just the expectation of Torontonians right now, because the younger generation sees a lot of what the parents got for the price, and that I want that, and I can do that with that kind of income. But unfortunately, in the next few years, maybe like a decade or so, when that idea is gone, and like the Gen Z or adults and maybe having kids, it's like, well, this is the kind of property I was able to get for this income. It's just going to become the norm, which is kind of where I grew up, which is kind of the norm. Like 700 square feet, 2-bedroom was considered luxuriously big. Like most of my family lives in a 2-bedroom that's like 650 square feet, and it's like 20 years old back in China. So the expectation is different, and I think it's going to change. And people aren't going to want to hear that. But unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen when a growing city, continues to grow, especially the way we grow. And finally, the Toronto condos that have marketed and sold before construction typically sells for at least 400 per square foot. Look, let's just do 1,000 square feet because that's what it's going to cost to build. Now you multiply it by the city's recommended 3-bedroom of 1,140, so you're like 1.6 mil. And 1.6 mil can easily get you a 3 or 4 bedroom with a backyard and parking. That's the problem, right? The math just doesn't math. And even when you factor in the maintenance fee, it actually increases your carrying costs every single month. And that's why a lot of people even look at condos, because about every $400 or so of maintenance fee, you're looking at, another 100 grand on your purchase price. So a lot of people are like, well, I'd rather shift my $800 maintenance fee on this 1,100 square feet unit and just buy something that's $200,000 more expensive. That's freehold, have parking and a yard. And that's kind of why everyone just shifts towards the freehold space and why these family condos make no sense. Now, there's a legitimate question as to whether private developers can reasonably be expected to deliver true family-sized units that people can afford. Look, like I said before, it's not up to the private sector to create these units. If there's profit, they will do it. But right now, if you really think about it, and I've talked about it many times before, if $1,000 a square foot is what it costs to build a unit right now for the condo space, 1/3 of that is hard costs and soft costs. 1/3 of that is land costs, and 1/3 of that right now is taxes. That's before any profits. So if you really think about that equation, generally builders make 15% of it, right? So in that equation of $1,000 a foot, you're looking at $150 a foot. It's a lot of profit, but it's a lot of risk. But if you think about the tax component, which is 33%, and if you think of the tax as government revenue, right? The government is now making 33% on the pre-construction purchases on top of all the other transfer fees. So if you remove that component, you could bring prices down and make it more reasonable. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And that's kind of, the he said, she said, everyone's pointing fingers, greedy developers, greedy politicians, they need more tax revenues, blah, 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 right? So that's why it's an endless vicious cycle. And this is going to be the hardest thing for people to kind of admit, but people need to give up the idea that Toronto is set up to house workers in the middle class families, especially downtown. It's just not going to be that case. Most of the people I know that are buying right now, their incomes are average of over 100 grand. And when you have two people put together, that's how you get these price points, right? But if you're looking at someone with minimum wage or entry-level income, it's really, really difficult unless you have family help. That's just unfortunately the fact. And we're going to continue going that way because we have so many people coming that outpaces the supply we can bring on the market that is affordable because of these gridlocks from the development rules, the politician rules, and the fact that building is so expensive right now. And that's ultimately why this 3-bedroom thing is not going to work. Unfortunately, the housing crisis we have in Toronto is years in the making, and we're not going to fix this in like a year or two or with any like magical silver bullet or any magical government announcement. It's going to take years of lots of work to resolve this. And, let's be real, we should probably taper down on the immigration a little bit so that we can solve this. Because no matter how much you try to build, if you have more people coming in trying to buy more homes and get housed, you're not going to build sufficiently enough for them, despite all the things we're trying to do in this kind of economic environment. Anyways, hope this gives you an idea what's going on. And if you do want to chat about your upcoming real estate move for the upcoming fall market, you can do so by booking a call with me using the link that's on the screen. It's www.chatwithzen.com. Until next time, your move, your future. See ya. Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one or this one? You know what? Just watch them both.